Ugh, I know I'm gonna get sniped for this, but screw it. Remakes, sequels, and reboots do not disregard the originals. I have my own sniper rifle ready to snipe at you back. Come at me, fools. I'm gonna let you in on a little question. Don't you hate it when someone online says that this thing is so bad that it utterly desecrates someone who's dead? I mean, think about it. The Backyardigans AI reboot that Janice Burgess would have hated. The Crow reboot that Brandley would be rolling in his grave. Saving Bikini Bottom and other SpongeBob spin-offs that make Seven Hellberg sink deeper into the abyss. The public domain horror movies to which the creators wish for a mercy kill. It never ends. There is no question about it. If you try to find positives about something that is considered disrespecting a legacy, you will get torn to shreds by the most vocal of people online. These people, aside from calling you a shill, will also call you a gravedigger, a social justice warrior, an insane lunatic, a Sweet Baby Inc. employee, an Anita Sarkeesian fanatic, a supporter of Susan Wojcicki and her YouTube changes, my second personal favorite, the devil himself, and the best of all, an initiator of 9/11. Some people are terminally online. Zayd Magenta can only blush at this.
What double standard backwards bullshit is that? I don't care if he called you the C word, just take the damn sandwich it.
To my surprise, watching or playing something being accused of disrespecting someone who's dead, I feel like the hatred for something gets overblown fast. Even the worst things in existence would be overhated. Maybe it's because I'm more generous to films and shows than others. Please, tell me how the Backyardigans reboots disrespect the person who's dead and uses AI. And your answer is, the creator/actor would have hated this, and everything looks suspiciously artificial. Suspiciously artificial, and saying that the dead creator would have hated this is the worst argument you can make in front of me. Suspiciously artificial is not the same as confirmed artificial. Those two words are something different. The creator would have hated this is a superfluous statement because they're not here to judge. Looking at other Nick properties, look at how incredible some of their shows look with a similar animation style. It may be fewer frames, but you can't deny that it looks incredible for a show. The designs, as hated as they are confirmed to be artificially designed. Nick has used AI before in their commercials, but it's not confirmed that this is artificially generated. As for the creator who would have hated this, didn't the original Backyardigans still upload videos based on the show after she died? Wasn't that somewhat of a cash-in? So, how does this disrespect Janice Burgess' legacy? Because they still upload the original. The short answer is that it's not. The new designs, as bad as they are just trying to bring a new audience in, but it only succeeded in driving the old ones away.
Oh my goodness!
But what if the creator was still alive, but yet not working on the reboot? After all, Craig McCracken hated the Powerpuff Girls reboot while working for Wander Over Yonder, and the only word you should take is from him. If Craig McCracken died in a car accident on his way to Disney while working on Wander Over Yonder at the time of the reboot airing, this would have been seen in a worse light. Craig McCracken would be rolling in his grave, and this show spits onto his legacy. If you like this show, you're no fan of Craig. All you enjoy is the pain and suffering of us. Fans are the only true voice here. We buy guns and execute you through a firing squad. We should put Craig on a pedestal for hating the reboot. Like,
What the fuck?
I feel like fans have become worse as time goes on. They're so overly defensive about their favorite shows and movies that if you express joy to something they hate, I expect them to show up armed and ready to assassinate you in public.
The harassment, the fanfictions, the fan art, they're everywhere.
No matter how much evidence you have to prove that Harold and the Purple Crayon was a disaster, they refuse to listen to Watch Mojo is just listing it as number 5 of the worst films of 2024, or the fact that the critic review scores of Rotten Tomatoes was broadened. Fans drive people away from things you enjoy. They say that critics are corrupt and are being paid by companies to say something positive about whatever they praise. So, if that is true, why are you blaming the critic and not the company that's paying them? When YouTubers are openly meant to getting sponsors, no one gives a shit, but the moment you gave Dustborn and Concord a 7, it goes to hell real fast. Is it easier to say you gave Dragon Age Veilguard a 9 and leave it at that? Am I gonna go to Disneyland because I like Star Wars Outlaws or that one forgettable Avatar game that came out a few years ago? It's been said that the audience score is what matters, but I also question if audiences are the people you should listen to, because like I said, they're assassins, so.
I didn't forget everything. I remember how to kill you, asshole.
They act like they're the ones in control, and I have the right to snap their necks, so. In reality, in my opinion, for something to be disrespectful of the dead, it only exists to a very small portion that almost no one hears of its existence, so they have to fail big time to me, and I found one for now. But we'll get to that later. Just because the majority of the audience says it's bad and spits on a legacy, it doesn't mean that it's bad to you and that it continues a legacy. A piece of media being created isn't made to piss on someone's legacy when you have the original right there for you to enjoy. Why don't you watch that one instead? But not everyone has access to that old thing, so what do studios do? They remake it for a new audience. It varies on how it works to whatever they create, but at least there'll be something there for people to enjoy. Even if the creator or someone involved in the original hates it, it doesn't mean you can enjoy it. The toxic fanbase would hold on to this as evidence that this is disrespectful to a legacy, when the real problem is that it's just bad in general. You could argue that the creator's word is paramount in this regard. Sometimes you have to wonder if their word holds any meaning. Someone who would disrespect the dead would do so intentionally just to piss off people. I can argue like a one person who does this. You can accuse something just to make a quick buck, but at least that was with good intentions. Why would you want to create something deliberately terrible to begin with?
There's no reason for me to live!
If you create something deliberately despite something or make something terrible to start with and fail at that, you become no better than the product you're trying to usurp. And you know what? Let's look into movies that were made that were accused of disrespecting a legacy and how they do not insult a legacy. I'll be accused of digging up a grave, and while I can't understand their perspective, I'll be suspended on Twitter for 6 months for saying free speech. But still, grab your shovel and dig up those graves. It's time to enter the happiest place on earth. I understand where this hatred comes from. This was made for a quick buck. They're all rehashing the originals. Walt Disney would have hated this. Ariel is black. Rachel Ziegler said fuck Trump supporters. Rag! I have previously made a video on the Little Mermaid remake almost 2 years ago, so I can't understand from the audience perspective why they're so hated. But that was 2 years ago. I haven't uploaded a video for over a year after that one. Look at me now, reviewing channels that were killed off through viewership or the network's decision. At the time of recording, Snow White starring Rachel Ziegler as Snow White and Gal Gadot as the Evil Queen had hit theaters. It was directed by Mark Webb, known for his music videos, but most famously of them all, The Amazing Spider-Man. Both films. Both. After coming back from my Snow White experience, I can say that it's essentially Snow White and the Huntsman for kids. In that film, Snow White and the Huntsman are on the run from the evil queen who terrorized their kingdom into a dystopian nightmare. The villagers are overworked and taxed heavily. Farmers, bakers, and tailors are turned into soldiers for the queen. The evil queen is Hitler. It will later get a sequel titled The Huntsman, Winter's War, about the evil queen's sister, who serves as Universal's version of Elsa from Frozen, plotting to resurrect the evil queen. The huntsman and his new lover, some random woman, team up with the dwarves from the previous film to stop her.
Shut your mouth, you monkey slug.
Shut yours, you grotty wanker.
I'm not your buddy, friend. He's not your friend, guy. I'm not your guy, buddy. He's not your buddy, friend.
Both films, despite having their issues, took the common Snow White tale into a darker and edgier retelling of the original story, and I had a blast watching both. Granted, it's not high art, but I had a popcorn muncher with these two movies that Disney must have seen and decided to use some elements in a remake. Despite what people say online, Disney's Snow White isn't a rehash of the original animated tale, it's more of a retelling of that tale with an entirely new plot, while also bringing in the old scenes so that fans could jump out of their seats. Gal Gadot's performance was there. Rachel Ziegler is excellent as Snow White, and so is the Prince of the film, played by Andrew Burnap. Wait, there was no prince in that film! So yes, the Prince of Snow White is not Prince Charming, but rather a thief that the princess falls in love with. That's Robin Hood right there in human flesh. To be fair, in the remake's defense, I like this change a lot more, considering that the prince in the original film doesn't do much aside from kissing Snow White and just meeting her. At the time of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs production, it was incredibly taxing to give the prince a larger role, considering that Walt and the team did a labor-intensive animation for Snow White and the Evil Queen, so his role was just this. With Robin Hood being a thief stealing just to eat, and meeting Snow White before the kiss, it gives him depth and therefore a more interesting character. I mean, sure, it's too similar to Aladdin, but at least it was better than him. Good on you, Disney. You don't need to make that Robin Hood remake, just use him and not photorealistic creatures. Robin Hood also has his merry men of crew, and I don't know anyone's names, and let them be midgets for all I care. As for the dwarves, they just mine, go home, and mine again. They don't chase the evil queen, they don't assist Snow White in the final battle, they just stand there and do nothing. As for the CGI,
You'll get it.
it's lovely. As for the guards who serve the queen, they do have an interesting backstory where they used to be bakers, farmers, and tailors until the queen forced them to become her servants. But a speech from Snow White telling them to betray the queen because they used to be good isn't enough to convince them to switch sides. Man, that must be easy to do in real life. Hope it would not lead to war.
Spartans! Prepare for glory!
Oh, and we gotta speak about that war part, because it's the worst final battle in Disney history. The evil queen smashes a mirror and she's killed. The end. That's it. I'm not lying. The evil queen just kills herself. No one lays a blade, spell, or finger on her. Not even Snow White herself. She killed herself in a fit of rage. Even Snow White and the Huntsman had Snow White kill the queen.
And only by fairest blood is it undone.
This ain't no place for kids.
Hooray! I just watched a Disney film of all Disney films. In all seriousness though, Snow White wasn't the worst Disney film ever, or not even the worst remake ever. It's a forgettable experience. I forgot about it when I left the theater. So yes, the magic is taken away, but the film is still there, being as uninsulting as possible. It's much better to experience the magic of going to Disneyland again than to watch this movie, or maybe watch it when it comes to Disney Plus. But the controversies around it is enough to crush the evil queen with the boulder and have lightning strike it twice. Oh wait, I'm talking about the original tale, not the remake. Obvious controversies like race swapping aside, and a nightmare CGI of the dwarves, the film's most notorious controversies on its Wikipedia page is that Rachel Zegler criticized the original film and Gal Gadot and Zegler's political views. Let's start with the political views. If you haven't noticed, there's been an ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine over the land of Israel since World War I. Israel, along with Palestine, has been engaging in battle over their territory since World War II. On October 7, 2023, a Palestinian militant group called Hamas, along with others, launched terrorist attacks across Gaza. Over 1,000 people were killed and many more were wounded. This attack initiated the Gaza War. Since October of 2023, the Palestinians and Israelis have engaged in multiple conflicts across Gaza and Israel. This includes the kidnapping of a family with 2 young sons, one of whom is an infant, the Al-Ali Arab hospital explosion, resulting in the deaths of about 500 Palestinians, the Flower Massacre, in which over 100 Palestinian civilians were killed seeking food from aid trucks by the Israelis, the Tel Al-Sultan attack, in which a displacement camp was firebombed and killed about 40 to 50 Palestinians, and most shocking to the world, the death of a 5-year-old Palestinian girl. I can understand why Free Palestine became trending, and why everyone has either the Palestine flag or a watermelon, but still, I'd rather stay out of this. Now you may be wondering how Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler fit into this, along with Disney. Ever since their filming in Xinjiang, where the Chinese government is accused of carrying out an ongoing campaign of cultural genocide against the Muslim Uyghur population, Disney couldn't get itself into more international conflict. Disney has donated $2 million to Israel following the attacks by Hamas, with Gal Gadot joining in support of Israel. Just as it was recording this video, it's been resurfaced that Gal Gadot served in the Israel Defense Force, so boycott this film, said the people against Wonder Woman. Meanwhile, Rachel Zegler has voiced support for Palestine. Oof, I can imagine supporters for both sides getting into a Homelander and Omni-Man moment.
Playtime's over, you spoiled brat.
Free Palestine.
Oh, I'm just getting started.
Save Israel now. Like I said, I'd rather stay out of this. And I know what I'm gonna get in the comments. You don't care about people in Gaza being killed right now while you enjoy going to Disneyland who donated that money to have more Palestinians being killed? Bro, didn't you hear what I said? I would rather stay out of this.
I'm staying out of this.
I only thought about what was informed to me rather than make a decision myself. Yes, what has been going on there recently, such as a missile attack in Gaza that killed over 400 Palestinians that happened 3 days before the release of Snow White, is horrible, but I'd rather not bring that topic to this channel because it's irrelevant and kind of nerve-wracking. Do your own research and determine who you side with. Hey, this is editing cringe. Rachel Zegler had stood her ground with her support of Palestine so hard that the producer of Snow White had to fly out and meet with her in person, but Zegler stood her ground. It doesn't add anything aside from what I mentioned, but this had to be included because it reinforced what Zegler believed. Meanwhile, Gal Gadot's backlash for supporting Israel became so great that Disney had to pay for security for her and her children's safety. Okay. The other political view that got major attention was this Instagram post by Rachel Zegler condemning Donald Trump as the president. After Donald Trump won his 2nd term as president, hundreds of users left Twitter to join Blue Sky, with others switching to other platforms like Instagram, Threads, or Snapchat. Rachel Zegler was one of them. While she left Twitter before the election, she still uses her Instagram account. A majority of the posts are standard being in premieres and all that, but one post said this: I echo Ethel Kane's statement more than anything. May Trump supporters, voters, and Trump himself never know peace.
Bye, bitch.
If you are against Trump, congratulations! You have another person on your side disowning what he's currently doing as president. His right-hand man also supports crunch time while paying people to boost his path of exile on Diablo 4 accounts. But if you are a Trump supporter, this is your 9/11. Calls for a boycott spread across social media, with Zegler having to delete said posts. But that did little to quell the flames. Conservative media outlet The Daily Wire decided to fire back with their own version of Snow White, Snow White and the Evil Queen, set for release in the same year as Disney's Snow White remake. Good luck with that since the lead actress for that movie left her company. That leaves us with Disney's Snow White remake and how it reflects Disney live-action remakes as a whole.
You disrespect the dead!
It's very easy to say that it spits in Walt Disney's grave, and everyone who worked on this film should roll back into the hells where they belong. Lillian Disney would have gotten a second stroke while rotting in her coffin. Everyone who paid money just to see it should be crucified while being whipped at the same time. Like, you can't get more extreme than this? Like ripping your jawline in half? Okay, you know what? This guy can buzz off. Sure, there are gonna be people who are watching this film just to spite those who claim that this remake spits into Walt's legacy, but it's also there in case case anyone wants to watch a modern retelling of a tale. Plenty of other Snow White films and shows were created either for the sake of money or to retell the tale that was once original and in the public domain. Snow White and the Huntsman, which featured Bella Swan and Thor, was a darker and edgier retelling of Snow White. And I say retelling loosely because it's not Snow White. It's more like The Terminator, but it relies on fantasy instead of science fiction. I'm not saying that it spits on the original tale, but I will acknowledge that the writers for that are trying something interesting on paper.
You cannot defeat me!
Yet that film wasn't accused of spitting on a legacy, mainly because it wasn't based on an animated film.
Fun!
Neither is its sequel, which is accused of being like Frozen.
Leave my children alone.
The original animated film from Disney was and is a classic, and the remake was seen as money grabbing. But hold on. Money grabbing? Isn't that what influenced Walt Disney to create the first animated feature?
Walt realized that only feature films would generate the kind of income that would allow his studio to grow.
Back in 1993 when Snow White was greenlit, Walt Disney seemingly had it all. His shorts were hits, ranging from Mickey Mouse to Silly Symphonies, but he didn't get enough money to satisfy him. A full-length animated movie would be seen as revolutionary, even though there were already animated films before Snow White, and expand the growth of Walt's studio. That passion for the project only added to the money fuel Disney had. Walt's brother Roy and his wife Lillian saw this project as a huge failure. The project was insanely expensive at the time, $1.5 million. It was nearly a third of the amount of the most expensive film at the time, a silent film based on Ben-Hur. Yes, it would have costed $33.7 million by today's amount, but Disney was a small studio at the time of the film's production.
He gave us 50 cents a piece, which was a lot of money, the equivalent of at least $10 now, to have a nice dinner and to come back to the studio where he related by himself the whole Snow White story.
And yet when the film was released, it broke all expectations, earning $8 million when it was first released. It later garnered more revenue with releases during Walt's life up until his death in 1966. 1952 and 1958 were the only years when the film was re-released while Walt was still alive. Meanwhile, Walt was greenlighting films even though they flopped during World War II. Cinderella became Walt's next biggest hit, and that was released in 1950. It was followed by Alice in Wonderland, followed by a re-release of Walt's Snow White. Disney even dabbled into live action with Treasure Island and Robin Hood, the former which featured the late Bobby Driscoll. Yes, as in that Bobby Driscoll.
You coward!
Coward? Me?
So even back when Disney was still alive, he did this for money and expansion, which brings more money. Why else do we have Disneyland? Walt wanted a theme park for families and had the ambition to expand the park, even though it was a fortune back then and now. $17 million in 1954, $153 million by today's time. It's now the second most visited park in the world, behind Disney World. When rival studios like Universal and Warner Bros. Saw Disney's success, they decided to copy it with their themed attractions to varying degrees of success. When smaller studios see how Disney make gazillions with their products, they decide to jump into the pool, only for the mouse to kick them out of the pool. Sorry, the pool is closed. Have you ever heard of Filmation? The studio behind He-Man and She-Ra, the animation studio known for making animated projects on a low budget expecting huge profit returns, on paper by today's standards, that would have sounded like a recipe for disaster. But back then, Filmation used this technique, which not only worked, but kept them afloat for over 25 years.
I think Lou was very conscientious of keeping as much production in the country as he could.
Wait, I know that guy.
What cost-cutting techniques did he use? Limit the animation and reuse it over and over and over again.
Good animators come in and you draw a hero doing something, or a villain doing something, or an animal behaving a certain way. And a lot of that was referenced and reused and traced over time and time again. We had piles and piles of stock books showing how characters moved or reacted.
This is the equivalent of keyframing and recycling that keyframe for a video on YouTube on today's terms. It saves on work and time for me and a lot of other creators, but since there was no internet back when Filmation was at its peak, this was still labor intensive. You have to find which animation styles to reuse and how often you reuse it, otherwise you get something as incredible as this.
Wake Pinocchio, wake up, it's time to tell your story. Come on, wake up, tell the children of your adventures.
Filmation, in its infinite wisdom, decided to branch out into theatrical films. Let's enter the time portal back to the 70s. Huh. Was this graveyard a lie? Their first one was 1971's Journey Back to Oz. Wait, Journey Back to Oz. It's not a retelling of Wizard of Oz. The film's real purpose is to serve as a sequel to The Wizard of Oz, since the 1939 classic was still fresh in the audience's head at the time.
Remember Judy Garland and the Yellow Brick Road?
Filmation made their animated Wizard of Oz tale a sequel to that film. Okay, so this is me in the editing phase, and I discovered something new that rebuilds on the Yellow Brick Road. There's so much new information that it deserves a separate chapter of its own. For one, some of the original crew have returned for this film. Okay, only one.
I'll get you, my pretty.
The main actress who played the Wicked Witch of the 1939 original, Margaret Hamilton, returns as Aunt Em.
And your little dog, too.
Land's sakes, is that what's troubling you?
This was also her last film role before she became somewhat of a PBS kids icon. There's also Mickey Rooney, a co-star of Judy Garland who played Dorothy Gale. And speaking of Judy Garland, who's that being in her shoes? Why, it's none other than Judy Garland's daughter, Liza Minnelli. At the time of the film's release, she was known for Broadway shows like Best Foot Forward and Flora and the Red Menace. For film roles, she won an Oscar for Cabaret. And speaking of the film's release date, Journey Back to Oz was originally intended to be released back in 1964, when Filmation was in its early years. Because Filmation ran out of money to the point where it could bankrupt the studio, the project was put on hold. It doesn't help that during a recording session with Jenny Thomas, who was the tin man in this film, his audio recording was so bad in quality that it was unusable aside from his singing number.
Impossible.
It wasn't until later successes with their television shows that they could finally get back into the film industry. Liza Minnelli wanted to return to the film to re-record her lines as she was 16 during production like her mother during the original Wizard of Oz. But because she didn't provide any recordings, they used the old recordings.
Who's your friend?
Oh, his name is Pumpkinhead.
That figures.
So not only does this film use the original audio, but there's also new audio sprinkled in like spraying lime flavoring on spicy chips. That has gotten stale and tastes like cardboard.
I hate them.
But besides that, the film finally got to see the magic. While the Wikipedia article says it's a 1972 movie, it didn't get an American release date until 2 years later, which was the same year President Richard Nixon resigned.
Hold. Looks like we got a bomb.
It flopped at the box office and fell into obscurity until this video helped it garner surface. It had to compete with a Martin Scorsese film, a James Bond film, a parody of a monster film, Godfather 2, and a towering inferno. It was the worst time to release a movie, something that Filmation wouldn't learn until their downfall.
Oh, hi, it's me.
Fast forward to 1987, a film by Filmation called Pinocchio and the Emperor of the Night hit theaters. It stars James Earl Jones as the Emperor of the Night, and it also has Steve from American Dad here.
Don't worry, Father, you can count on me.
Oh, is that what you think? Okay, Mr. Brink, here we go.
Since Disney had just re-released Pinocchio 3 years ago at the time, it was not hard for audiences to be confused that this film was a sequel to that film. After all, Pinocchio has been turned into a human at the start of the movie. Enter the suits from the mouse. Disney sued Filmation for copyright infringement, but Filmation argued that since Pinocchio was in the public domain, they could do whatever they want with the characters. Do you remember seeing those Disney-like covers from Phoenix Games in those old Cat Icarus videos? No. Yes, despite attempting to fool gullible parents, Disney couldn't do much as these games, as misleading as they are based on tales based on public domain works. It's an expert loophole that Filmation and Phoenix abuse so that they can make money, and so Filmation won the lawsuit, allowing this film to be released. That bombed for Filmation, by the way.
Good heavens, the sky is falling!
In the summer of 1981, 2 Libyan jets suddenly attacked 2 American F-14s.
The broadcast news, Empire of the Sun, and Good Morning Vietnam were always on the same day on Christmas that chopped the Wood Boy. Despite being directed by an animator at Disney who worked on Sleeping Beauty, Peter Pan, and Lady and the Tramp, the film costed $10 million, but only made back $3 million, an absolute nail in the coffin. But at least it made more than the Ryan's World movie.
That was you! If we get out of this alive, you're so going to!
The film quickly fell into obscurity, and it wouldn't be until Wikipedia and this video helped it regain prominence that it garnered attention. It doesn't help that the film's plot is a rehash of the original tale. Pinocchio gets scammed by con artists, he goes to Not Pleasure Island, Stromboli is there, and so is Jiminy Cricket. But still, where is my live-action remake of Pinocchio and the Emperor of the Night, Universal? Ha? This wasn't the only Disney sequel Filmation worked on. Remember Snow White? Filmation saw the original Snow White and said, hey, let's do that again for Pinocchio. Entered the suits from the mouse again. They uncovered more information in this video. Filmation was planning to do a line direct-to-video sequels based on Disney properties, but changed enough elements to avoid the mouse. But the mouse has his nose working this time. One of these direct-to-video sequels was a sequel to Bambi called Bambi, Prince of the Forest. Disney stepped in with a lawsuit calling these films rip-offs, but Filmation said that these works were in public domain and have no right to be called rip-offs. We're just trying to catch up on the success of the original. We're not retelling the tale for a different generation. This wasn't until Shrek that Universal and DreamWorks outright parodied it along with poking fun at other Disney tropes. Regardless, Filmation was killed in action. On February 3rd, 1989, before the film was ready to release, Filmation shut down.
Filmation was an amazing training ground for writers and artists, and the studio was always willing to open its doors to new talent and give people a shot, and from then it was kind of up to you as to what you did with it.
And the library of Filmation content fell into the hands of a cosmetics company.
When it feels good, you want it to last.
You know them. L'Oreal.
And I'm with it.
L'Oreal would later give Filmation's library away, allowing networks like Cubo to air their old shows. Eventually, Filmation found a new home, DreamWorks, and they currently produce reboots/revivals of Filmation properties. So a happy ending to Filmation, not so much was Happily Ever After, or Snow White 2 as Filmation so claims. On June 30th, 1989, 4 months after the studio's closure, the film was released in the Philippines. 5 months later, the film rode its gondola to theaters in Italy, and just 1 year after the Philippines release date, the film flew to France. But we're still missing something, and that's an American release date. That wouldn't happen until 3 years later, the same year as Disney's original Snow White hit theaters again. If that wasn't bad enough, it had to compete with major contenders when the Filmation film was released in theaters. Snow White, as mentioned, Cliffhanger, Last Action Hero, Jurassic Park, and the 1993 Super Mario Bros. Movie, and that one bombed as well. And if you saw the trailer, then you know you're in a recipe for disaster.
Until the 7 dwarf elves came to her side.
Wait, dwarf elves? What the hell is this? Why the fuck does this dwarf look like a Looney Tunes character? Why does this dwarf look like it came from Alvin and the Chipmunks? Why does this mirror look like Cosmo from Beauty and the Beast? Wait a second, this film was developed before Beauty and the Beast. I think it may have been a coincidence. Regardless, the movie was a financial disaster and a critical devastation. It deserved to bomb. To make matters more confusing, as if the distributors wanted a quick buck, a video game tie-in was released a full year after the film came out. Since we all know how major motion pictures wanted to be major franchises nowadays, the fact was still true in the 80s when this was developed. Sequels were planned, but those plans are buried in the ground. With the dwarves and the roses and the evil queen downtown. Boo, boo, boo. Now, does all this from the Halle Berrys to the Rachel Zegler to the crystallized Gal Gadot spit on a legacy? The short answer is no. Making something for quick money doesn't spit on a legacy because you are bringing a tale adapted into another medium to attract a more recent generation to the original tale. Re-releasing media has become a common practice since the 50s when the man who innovated animation was still alive, and telling the tale now over 80 years later doesn't mean Disney's gonna replace the original. The original is still there for people to enjoy. Disney is just bringing new audiences in when the original tale might be a turn off to some. I'm not saying it was a good retelling, but it exists for a reason, and it's not spitting on Walt's legacy. Live action remakes, as a shadow of the original, have reason to exist. So stop saying it spits in Bolt's legacy. You aren't making yourself fair by saying that statement. You are not putting Bolt on a pedestal by saying a remake is terrible. Walt was not perfect. He did put himself through flaws too, like being a heavy smoker when not in public, but that's a normal thing some drug addicts do. What I'm saying from this statement is that you can say what a good person should act, or simply be one. I could end the video right there, to be honest, but we still have more movies accused of disrespecting a legacy when they are just bad in general, and the fact that the people who accuse them of disrespecting a legacy aren't pulling favors on themselves. I spent too much time in the past, let's go back to the future. I wonder what that crow is saying. I buried my guilt in the pit, in the sound. Boo, boo, boo. With the rust and the vultures and the trash downtown. Boo, boo, boo. The Crow reboot. I briefly talked about it in my autism video on the Unbreakable Boy and mentioned how it was a guilty pleasure of mine. So, what is a guilty pleasure? A guilty pleasure, simply put, is a thing you indulge that you know it's bad, but still come out enjoying it. I usually have one per year in terms of movies, shows, and video games. You see your favorite YouTubers bashing the thing you enjoy, tell them to go fuck themselves in their videos because you enjoy it. Or even if you do agree it's bad, but not as bad as everyone makes it out to be, you have the right to shoot them in the head.
Fuck you.
The Crow reboot, as not a masterpiece as it is, still has a lot of fun back I had when watching it 10 times, mainly because I used it in my PBS Kids video. So, Where does this movie fit with disrespecting a legacy? Remember what I said earlier, if the creator says they hate something, that must also mean you should hate it. The creator of whatever someone creates is gospel. Only they can do it right. How dare you sing praises to whatever? For starters, the creator who said this film disrespects the legacy of the original Crow is not the real creator of The Crow. Let's go back to the 1970s. The creator of The Crow is a man by the name of James O'Barr. James O'Barr's tale is nothing but filled with tragedy and loss, all perfect for the story of The Crow. Born as an orphan, when he was 18, his girlfriend was killed by a drunk driver. To cope with his loss, James O'Barr joined the Marines while creating a superhero known as The Crow. He took inspiration from a news article in Detroit about a young couple who had been murdered over an engagement ring that cost $20. The story was so outlandish that James O'Barr saw it as a perfect plot for his creation. The Crow is about a young man named Eric and his lover Shelley who are brutally murdered by a street gang. A year later, a spirit in the form of a crow resurrects Eric as he seeks to avenge their murders. Nowadays, the plot isn't that epic, but when it came out in 1989, it was brutal. The comics were dark and edgy, and that is what James loved while he was coping with his loss. The comics were almost like Tim Burton's Batman, gloomy, edgy, and wicked. I gave an abridged version of the story behind The Crow, but I recommend this video if you want more on the tale behind The Crow itself. It is such a fascinating tale of vengeance. I haven't read any of the comics myself, but they were popular enough to warrant a film adaptation starring Brandon Lee, the son of Bruce Lee. Now, the next part is pretty serious. It's impossible to discuss The Crow without mentioning the production behind it. During the filming of The Crow, Brandon Lee was accidentally killed by a defective gun blank. The remainder of the production was done through stunt doubles, shooting Eric through the shadows, or using early special effects to make him look like Brandon Lee. His stunt double replacement? Chad Stahelski, the director of John Wick.
That was a pretty good fight, huh?
Yeah.
From the audience's perspective, it's understandable why Brandon Lee would be known as Eric. Sequels to The Crow soon followed, starring different actors as The Crow, but not as Eric. There was also a TV series that also retold The Crow's storyline, starring different actors. For most modern audiences out there, aside from the original Crow, which was likely connected to Brandon Lee's passing, their first introduction to The Crow was an AVGN video.
They left me a flaming bag of shit!
For 19 years after The Crow, Wicked Prayer, the film series lay dormant while the comics lived on. That is until 2024, when a new film arose from the dead, and it only spiraled from there.
What do you mean?
A new Crow film was announced in 2008, which would be edgier than the 1994 film. Different actors were reported for the role of Eric. This included Mark Wahlberg, Channing Tatum, James McAvoy, Tom Hiddleston, Luke Evans, and Ryan Gosling. It was also rumored that Alexander Skarsgård was offered the part, but ultimately the role went to his brother, Bill Skarsgård. The role of Shelley went to an actor by the name of FKA Twigs, who also happens to be a singer as well. And that's it.
You have a problem.
Anything remotely similar to the comics isn't there. The villains were different, the setup for the plot was different, and the circumstances involving Eric and Shelley's deaths were different. The entire film is completely unfaithful to the comic. It's almost as if the writers were only told a brief synopsis from a Wikipedia article and told to write a plot about it.
We could download Wikipedia, whatever else we can find.
Let's just say that even if you won an Academy Award, you still would have written shit. The film wasn't received well, and like Filmation's catalog, bombed hard. The pacing is bad, the acting is mediocre, and people argue that the soundtrack is out of place. There's also a claim that this Eric Draven looks more like Jared Leto's Joker compared to the previous Eric Draven, who later made Heath Ledger's Joker take inspiration from, although I still thought at times it was incredible. The reason I called it a guilty pleasure was because of that opera fight. That was honestly the best part of the movie. My favorite scene is when the Crow cuts a bodyguard's hand clean off, when he says, "Screw it," and tries to take the easy way out. Bill Skarsgård has stated that he wasn't a fan of the ending, preferring something more conclusive, and I honestly agree with his statement. So where does this fit in with disrespecting a legacy statement? Look no further than the director of the original Crow, Alex Proyas, and the actor who played Sarah, Rochelle Davis. They both called the film disrespectful of Brandon's legacy and nothing more than a cash grab. Ouch. That's gotta hurt. However, I say this claim is bullshit.
You're a monster!
Call me a pisser on Brandon Lee's legacy, but this film does not disrespect his legacy. You have the original right there. Watch that instead. The movie doesn't disrespect Brandon Lee's legacy, it's just a bad film. Period. End of story. Want to know why it doesn't disrespect a legacy? I just answered that question for you.
Get the fuck out.
Plenty of other actors have taken on the Crow mantle, and even though they were not Eric, people still call him the Crow colloquially. It's as if Miles Morales and Peter Parker exist in the same universe, but only Peter Parker can be called Spider-Man. If Peter Parker dies, Miles Morales will have to fill in for him as a new Spider-Man. Spider-Man is anyone who can wear the mask as Stan Lee. Likewise, the Crow could be anyone who the Crow spirit chooses. Even the comics allow different people besides Eric to become the Crow.
But I think it was the best thing we did, making him so that he could be anybody under that costume.
While Brandon Lee will be remembered as Eric, what's stopping the Crow from guiding another soul if Brandon was never cast?
You couldn't see it through.
Alex Proyas is not the creator of The Crow. He only directed the film adaptation. The Crow is based on a comic created by James Zobar. If anything, he should have a say on whether or not it disrespects the legacy. Sources who met him in person also admit the remake is terrible, but I still say that the remake disrespects Brandon's legacy, then I have the right to punch him. Call me a devil child while I'm at it, but I'm not defending the Crow remake because I called it a guilty pleasure and that I'm defensive about it being fun bad. I'm defending it because the hatred behind this film was overwrought, that all you hear from people in the future is that anything being made when it was had a dead actors previously would be a disrespect to that original actor. If Brandon Lee was still around and not shot, and if he disowned the film, this section would not be on this list, mainly because he's alive. But with him dead, haters are gonna use it as a crutch to justify it being more than just bad. It's a horrible way to twist words to fit whatever narrative you're trying to push, and it makes people who are working on the film for a job be associated with a dead body or the creators' negative thoughts and acting like they're demons. The movie is not spinning on Brandon's legacy, it's simply a retelling of the original narrative, which it failed at. I'm not downplaying how bad it was, but I am explaining what the film's real purpose is, bringing it to a new generation rather than being just a cash grab as the director claims. As terrible and unfaithful as the Crow remake is, it is not as disastrous as the original Crusoe claims. Some people like to take this thing out of proportion and treat it as if the end of the world. If that is the case, then I say to Alex Proyas, who said it was a disrespect to Brandon's legacy, that you directed this film, Gods of Egypt, which happened to be considered one of the worst films ever made.
Bow before me or die.
So don't say you have a leg up against the reboot when this was nominated for the worst film in 2016.
It doesn't do what Hollywood, you need to know this, it doesn't engage us.
This movie is so convinced of how entertaining it is that it will not let up for even a split second. That's how awful it is.
Without exaggerating, it might be the crappiest big-budget Hollywood studio movie to date.
If your main argument was that the reboot was a cash grab, was City of Angels seen as a cash grab? Was Salvation a cash grab? Was Wicked Prayer a cash grab? Was the video game Tie-In a cash grab?
He's pulling her tits!
They're all bad, but they're not cash grabs. They just suck in general. I never met you in person, but this argument is devoid of logic when you consider the line between cash grab and expanding the lore of the original. Expanding on the original includes films like Smile 2, The Purge films, and Avatar: The Way of Water. Doing this for our cash grab goes to films like Joker 2, Taken 3, and the Jaws sequels. Even without a sequel, your film, Gods of Egypt, wants to be the next big franchise, which in itself is a wannabe cash grab. It doesn't help your kids that you call the critics disease vultures pecking at the bones of a dying carcass or deranged idiots for giving it an F.
I think your king should have higher standards.
I know this was nearly 10 years ago and off topic for this video when Alex made this post, but I find this to be very hypocritical and lucrative of its own, considering that he also directed I, Robot. All this talk about how edgy the Crow reboot is, let's take you to an even edgier side of movies. Let's enter the public domain. I'm gonna be accused for digging up multiple graves for this one, but fuck it. Can you keep an eye out for Popeye the Sailor Man? He's been assassinating people for no reason, but isn't Popeye usually a friendly character who loves spinach? Why is he killing random people?
Super edgy character, but he doesn't use a gun or anything?
This is another trend that has popped up recently, public domain horror. It started back in 2023 with a little film called Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. But for the context of this film, we must introduce you to the public domain.
Yes! Hell yeah! Hey, come on, baby!
Simply put, the public domain involves a creative work whose copyright has expired, meaning that anyone can use it without permission from the original creators.
It's a free-for-all.
The director of Blood and Honey, Reese Rake Waterfield, decided to capitalize it with an edgy Winnie the Pooh film. It won Worst Picture, Worst Director, and Worst Screenplay. To put it into Reese's words, I'm surprised our micro-budget film is being compared to Hollywood, but nevertheless, I don't mind the dubious honor as it places me in the same pool as directors whose work I admire so much. Damn! Blood and Honey was bad. Plain and simple. It's a run-of-the-mill slasher with Pooh and Pig as slasher villains. The acting is atrocious, the special effects are incredibly cheap, and the music choices, dear God. My favorite part is when the characters use a gun to fight Pooh and Piglet with one bullet. I'm not making this up.
I'm gonna make you pay what you've done to me.
She's mental.
But the major reason why it was seen as a disaster is the story behind Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is seen primarily as a Disney adaptation. You know him because he's yellow, has a red shirt, loves honey, and is a stuffed bear. He also got into some hot water in China.
Some people said Pooh looked like the Chinese president.
But what you do not know is that Pooh Bear was not a Disney creation. He was created by a British author by the name of A.A. Milne. A.A. Milne created the Pooh Bear based on his son Chris's stuffed bear. Disney only got the license to use that silly old bear in 1961, and they have been using it since in rides, video games, anime crossovers, and of course, TV shows. In 2022, Pooh Bear's copyright expired, meaning anyone can use him, leading to Blood and Honey. Blood and Honey to many viewers was seen as a completely edgy retake of Winnie the Pooh, but is it the first? Even when Pooh was still under copyright, there were edgier depictions of that character. You have the parodical takes from South Park, anything made by Robot Chicken, and trailer re-edits. Even official Disney merchandise that features the Pooh Bear had more mature themes and was even downright scary. You all know Christopher Robin 2018 and how it focused on a grown-up Christopher Robin who served in World War II, but there was a trend a year ago by the name of Piglet's Big Game.
Hey, you, looking at the screen.
Piglet's Big Game is an action-adventure video game released for the PS2, GameCube, Game Boy Advance, and Windows. In it, Pooh's friend Piglet must enter the dreams of his friends and face his fears.
Let me ask you a question. Do you like awesome things that are awesome?
On the surface, it seems to be an innocent children's game. There's an area filled with cookies and candy, Pooh is stuck in caramel, and there's a fountain of honey. It's enough to give you a sweet tooth until you get into the dreams. Now you see that restless town, Silent Eeyore Castle. Piglet's Big Game was very niche when it was released in 2003. At a time when Nintendo had Wind Waker, the PS2 had Devil May Cry 2, and Silent Hill 3 was only 2 months away. No one bothered with this game until 2024. Remember Silent Hill that I brought up? When listening to the soundtrack of Piglet's Big Game, a user on Twitter brought up comparisons to another game, Silent Hill and Resident Evil. A game made for kids, having the soundtrack maturity of an adult, that sent the internet into a frenzy. Scalpers took full advantage of this and sold copies for as much as $300 on eBay. Piglet's Big Game director, Pascal Stradella, even confirmed in an interview that Resident Evil and Luigi's Mansion were the main inspiration for Piglet's Big Game in a more cartoonish way. The game is a horror comedy aimed at children. The goal is not to frighten them, but to make them feel uneasy, to give them just the right amount of chills so they don't feel entirely at ease.
This town is full of heffalumps and woozles. How can you sit there and eat honey?
It's the kind of horror that edgelords wish to slash, but they end up with a generic creepypasta instead. The sole reason why I brought this game up is that it's possible to make a scary Winnie the Pooh product without relying on gore. So why is this film seen as a complete disrespect to A.A. Milne's legacy when you can scare gamers with Piglet? I can't stress this enough. Saying it's a disrespect to someone's legacy is an easy cheat card that people bring up. You could bring up the acting, the pacing, the soundtrack, or even aspects of the plot as reasons why something is considered a failure. Looking back at Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey, it's easy to say that it's a disrespect to the legacy A.A. Milne created, until you bring up the sequel. The first Blood and Honey was a disaster, but when you bring up its sequel, Blood and Honey 2, it is a night and day difference. The sequel is a massive improvement in almost every way. Better acting, better visuals, and believe it or not, a better plot than just Pooh and Piglet killing others.
It's porn time.
For one, they added lore to the creation behind Pooh, Piglet, Tigger, and Owl. In the movie, it's explained that children were kidnapped and experimented on with animal genes, turning them into mutant hybrids you see in the film.
He was experimenting, changing their genetics and whatnot.
This is the film's explanation of why Pooh and Piglet look like men in flannel masks. It may not be the best explanation, as is some of the Five Nights at Freddy, but at least it was something the audience could interpret rather than just mindless killers killing for the sake of it. If the movie continues to expand on this lore, then we have a reason for a dark and edgy Winnie the Pooh that isn't seen as edgelord slop. Notice how I focus exclusively on the Winnie the Pooh horror film, because when you get to the House of the Mouse, it gets more spiraling.
Oh, that is so last season.
On January 1st, 2024, Walt's creation of Mickey Mouse entered the public domain. Naturally, people wanted to capitalize on this with mature video games and films. There were short horror films, but this one in particular was called The Mousetrap in 2024. This was the first major slasher to have the mouse killing, and I say major loosely as it was done without any advertising whatsoever. Is it bad? Dear God, yes, it's as horrible as everyone feared. So much of this film is just characters sitting around talking before the killer mouse comes in. And when the killer does show up, he just pathetically kills those that are so horrible that even Blood and Honey could blush at. We don't even know why this Mickey is killing the heroes because it's never established what motivates him to do it.
What a complete...
and as for the heroes we root for, you're not gonna remember their names. The only one that captured my interest was this girl who looks like Jenna Ortega. In this alternate universe, she never became Wednesday and ended up in a cheap horror version of Beetlejuice. It opens with a Star Wars opening call that tries way too hard to be Family Guy funny, but you're better off watching Family Guy Star Wars than this. It is worse than Blood and Honey, and there's no doubt about it.
It's so plainly made to take advantage of a media culture dominated by recognition over quality.
There's a difference between so bad that it's good and just bad in general. The latter is what sums up this film. Detractors of this film will argue that it's an utter disrespect to Walt's legacy, similar to Disney live-action Remake. He would have hated to see his character as a killer, even though in the film, it's a guy in a Mickey Mouse mask who doesn't have Mickey Mouse traits, like using tomb physics, and also that there's an evil Mickey Mouse in previous media.
Sure thing!
You all know his depiction in South Park, but there were more violent depictions of the mouse such as Mickey Mouse in Vietnam. Mickey signs up to be a soldier in Vietnam, where he gets a headshot. And that's not even the oldest Mickey Mouse media where it was never endorsed by Disney. There was also Mickey Camp de Gers, a book that roughly translates to Mickey Mouse at the Gers internment camp during the Holocaust.
How about this heat, huh?
The book is short, so I can summarize it here. Mickey ends up in France, where he's arrested by the French police. He's believed to be Jewish, so he ends up at an internment camp run by the Nazis. Mickey is treated horribly at the camp, with one panel of him using a magnifying glass to see his food ration. At the end, Mickey erases himself and draws himself heading back to America.
And the person who drew the comic strip was then killed.
Even though this example was not graphic and Mickey is still portrayed as a hero in the story, it is still quite a shocker that a place like the Holocaust would be a Mickey Mouse of all things. And that's not even the only World War II media that featured Mickey without approval from Walt himself. Do you remember Tokyo Disney Resort? Then you know that Japan loves this rodent, and I mean love him. They love a lot of the magic about Disney that we have anime characters crossing over with them.
That's right!
But back in 1934, a time when Walt was still alive, and 4 years prior to Snow White, Japan saw Mickey Mouse as the embodiment of evil.
Why did you have to say that?
Mickey represented American capitalism and imperialism. So the Japanese created this propaganda film in which Mickey Mouse represented America invading on a pterodactyl and snake army. Oh, and bringing crocodiles while we're at it. Mickey Mouse fires bullet bills from the pterodactyl and then engages in a sword fight with this guy. I can only imagine what would happen if Mickey won. To my knowledge, Walt has not seen this film, and I can only see him rolling in his grave if he does. So does that mean that this is disrespectful to his legacy? To answer it quickly, this film came out when Walt was still alive, so that isn't a disrespect technically, but it is bad, and it's clear that Japan looks back at this now with some embarrassment. Be glad we now have Kingdom Hearts.
That'll be fun!
In their 2022 documentary, Mickey, The Story of a Mouse, which documents Mickey's popularity across the world, it acknowledges all the parodies from The Simpsons to The Godfathers to the World War II propaganda films. Disney said in the documentary that if you as a creator create something, you don't get to control what you create with it.
You don't control what happens to your characters.
This includes fanfics, fan-made comics, and videos like this one. They even got the producer of Mickey Mouse in Vietnam to speak about his experience with the mouse.
All significant art represents an attempt to understand reality.
He should rest in peace, knowing easily that he became part of the history Walt had formed. Disney even acknowledged some of the controversies they have gotten themselves into, and we're not talking about the treatment of workers, which is still a huge problem at Disney. They talk about how Disney sued daycare centers for unauthorized use of their characters.
Our legal protection of Mickey has inevitably led to some uncomfortable situations over the course of the company's history.
You hear that? Disney even admitted that he got boo-boos from the crowd as early as the 80s. Bob Iger admits in the documentary that Disney went a little too far with what Walt originally intended to do with his company.
Not quite heartless, but he didn't have enough of the identity that Walt created for him originally.
Sure, Disney isn't ethical by today's standards, but it's far from the soulless corporation that many haters paint it as, because you could still tell there is magic within the company, just not as much as when Walt was in his early years.
It's been fun to see kids going, wow, these are actually funny.
You may have noticed that throughout this video, I have said that these films are just bad in general, and they do not disrespect a legacy because either the legacy film would have merits of its own, or the people involved with saying that this is a disrespect to a legacy have done similar actions in their films they're accusing others as, or at the very least, they're not pulling any favors on themselves when they did similar terrible behavior. I am not pulling a leave billion-dollar company alone card because I have my gripes with them, but saying that the creator would have hated this does not give you a better moral code than whatever they create. Ideally, those with huge nostalgia for the original creation would expect new newcomers to watch the original work. But realistically, many would find the old work dated and want something new and fresh in their heads. And since remakes have been proven to be successful in Hollywood, executives would greenlight them in favor of getting new people into the tale. Mixed results occur. You people complain about the lack of originality in Hollywood. Well, we try with originality, and they sometimes never work for some reason. Remakes and sequels do not spit on a legacy. They just exist because they want to exist. People give them money because they want to see their favorite actors do it out on the big screen, regardless of quality. They're not mainstream critics. They'll absorb it and move on to the next entertainment. You don't need high art to make a successful film. Just make a popcorn muncher and you're good to go. As for legacy, while it may come off as a cash grab at first glance, the final product should be judged by its own merits. Snow White will be seen as a cash grab, but it's really nothing more than a mediocre film with some merit. Snow White and the Evil Queen, created by Daily Wire, disrespects the original tale more than Disney's take, as it was made to spite Disney.
Oh no! Here we go again!
Conservative children's media is more of an adult's choice because they're the ones who are choosing what their child would watch, rather than children selecting it themselves. They often disguise the product with cutesy words and images to make it look innocent and fun to indulge in.
They tend to not really be for the kids. They tend to seem more for the adults who want to, I guess, virtue signal, for lack of a better term.
Yet children won't understand safe spaces, or how dressing up as a walrus is a connection to trans people wanting reassignment surgery. Only conservative adults do, and they will twist it into something sinister for the child to avoid.
So my class is a safe space, says the evil character. So the whole purpose here is to teach kids that if someone tells them they're in a safe space, they shouldn't trust it ever.
Do you want another piece of media that's considered disrespectful to a legacy? Look no further than the 2023 film, Assassin.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
What's that? You never heard of this film? Because you never did, because you were saving up for the Super Mario movie. Assassin stars Bruce Willis in his final role alongside those two actors you never heard of.
We got a problem here?
It's awful. End of story. I could end the video right there. But this film is truly atrocious. The acting is shit, the editing is crap, and this is how they opened the movie. I am not editing this, by the way.
Nice word art title screen. Is this a game or a 4th grade book report?
This is how the movie is edited, and this is how the movie ends.
I could already feel him in my head. Come on!
Bruce gets shot. I cannot stress this enough on how horrible this was. Aside from his Die Hard role, Bruce Willis was an acclaimed actor for The Sixth Sense, Armageddon, and The Fifth Element. And it's sad to see someone like him be retired into a wave of shit films in the late 2010s and 2020s.
Great.
Bruce Willis is not the only actor who suffered from this, but he is the most infamous. I'll probably do one for this actor.
You should just have handed out pamphlets. It would have been a lot easier.
I always come across direct-to-video movies at Walmart and feel sad that no one would buy them. They're usually priced around the $15 to $20 range and would often feature Bruce on the main cover because of Bruce Willis. I heard from a source that Bruce Willis shot most of his scenes alone, so he never interacts with anyone when they're in the same shot. While I can't confirm this, it does seem reasonable. Can someone pull the trigger again? Normally, when you get to an actor's last role, you'd expect the film to be amazing like the original Crow. But then you get to an actor's last role in an awful movie which they will live in while they're rotting as a corpse under the ground. Granted, it's not as if the actors aware of what they'll be in is gonna be the worst ever, but ending their career with a terrible movie will not make it look good on a legacy of once excellent films that they starred in.
But for me, it was Tuesday.
Fans of that actor will be shocked at how an actor fell from grace. So that is how you ruin a legacy. No replacements, no cash grabs, no killings, just end with something incredibly awful. There's really nothing more to say aside from what I already said, so fuck it. If you ever come across a discussion online with one person saying that the original creator of that product would hate it, kick them in the nuts. They're not real people. If they could play about wokeness ruining Hollywood, you have the right to throw a Molotov cocktail at them. We're not in 2016. This is a decade later, and I have right to beat you up. Anyway, that's all I have. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to stay out of cringe.
Thanks everyone. Be good people.